I'm Liselle Sambury, and welcome back to my channel where I talk about writing craft and all things traditional publishing, including my own journey as a traditionally published author. And today is a very special day because my third book, Delicious Monsters, is officially out in the world. If you didn't know, Delicious Monsters is a young adult psychological thriller / horror following two teen girls navigating the treacherous past of a mysterious mansion 10 years apart. Daisy, who can see the dead and is coming to discover that the house her and her mom have inherited has maybe just about as many secrets as her mom does. And Brittany, who has her own history with the mansion and is not only trying to uncover the truth of what happened 10 years ago, but also to expose her mother's lies. Both timelines pushing the girls to confront the most terrible monsters of all, those that hide in plain sight. So that's Delicious Monsters, and it is out today. And this video, I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a condensed, I guess, version of how I got here, of how this book, came together, from writing process to me submitting it to my publisher to then selling and doing publisher edits. But I'm also going to chat a little bit about the highs and lows of publishing this book thus far, because, at this point, I'm filming this in early February, so you're going to see this when the books come out. So it's really, in some ways, just started that journey of actually being a published book. But I wanted to talk about the highs and lows so far and kind of my hopes for the book for the future and how I am feeling about the book being published right now. So that's what this video is going to be about. There will be timestamps in the description below if you want to jump around to different parts. And I have also linked a playlist. It's called The Journey of Delicious Monsters. And so I wrote this book when I was on Authortube. So the entire journey is really documented on here. So if you want to watch the long form and go through all of the different writing vlogs where I talked about working on this project, you can check those out as well. But for now, let's go ahead and get started. Let's begin with the writing process of this book. So how it initially came together. So I first started writing Delicious Monsters in around August of 2019, which feels like literally like ages and ages ago because it just feels like so long ago, because now we're in 2023 and that just feels like a lifetime ago. For time, helping with that, I had sold Blood Like Magic, which is my very first book that came out in 2021. I had sold that in April. So this was just like a few months after I had sold that book, and I was trying to, kind of think about what I might want to write next and work on next. And so that was kind of partially how this came together. So I started small. I started with, during 1 month, just kind of setting myself a goal just to write 20,000 words. I think this was kind of like a deadline shifting thing, and like I had some free time and I decided, I'll try and work on this and see how it goes. And so I wrote that initial 20,000 words. Ask me if I remember writing it. I really don't, because it was so long ago. But I had written a start to it and I had the beginnings of the book. And then in NaNoWriMo of that year for November, I was heading over to London for I believe it was was it my second trip or my first trip? My second trip to London. So I was heading over there and I was doing NaNoWriMo. So I was going to finish out my last, week of National Novel Writing Month working on the book. And for that's what sticks out in my head the most as part of the writing process, because I had really done so much work on it and I had worked towards the climax, and I had had this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is longer than I thought it was gonna be. I'm writing so much more during this month than I had originally planned, but I kept pushing through. I had this moment where I got really emotional about the book, and I like cried, which I had not previously cried while writing my own words. And like, I don't know, it's a weird experience because I was like, it feels a little bit narcissistic, but also I'm like, I don't know, it's not like I set out to do that. But I remember finishing and really thinking, I think this could be something special, and I think this could be a really good book, and I certainly feel like my craft is elevated. I feel like I've done a better job writing this, and I feel like I can see my improvement. And I think that was really kind of the journey for me in the writing process of this book. So I hadn't to me successfully done dual POV before. I had tried it for the second book I'd written, but I don't think I did a great job with it. So that was that. And I had also written the book in past tense, where I had really previously written my books always in present tense. So that was another kind of, structural craft challenge. But I really just, at the end of the writing process, felt like I had improved and I'd really stepped up my writing game, and I had really done better. And I think that's what I remember the most about this writing process, is really feeling like I had improved. And that ended up being the NaNoWriMo where I'd written the most words. I think I had written like 75,000 words in addition to the 20K I already had. So it ended up being a rather large book, which is not, it's kind of par for the course for me. But yeah, that was really my full memory of the writing process in this kind of succinct package. That was the writing process, and now we are transitioning into submission. So if you don't know, submission is when you submit your book to publishers in order to have them potentially publish it. So in this case, after I had done all of my writing, me and my agent worked together back and forth on edits and getting things ready. That was its own journey, because we had kind of, originally, the way it was, we had gone back and forth a few times. So the way the book is now, Daisy sees dead people, and that's established from the start. I also had an iteration where I didn't reveal that until halfway through the book. And then me and my agent went through, we did a draft with it the way it is now, and then we did a draft with it with the ghost being revealed in the middle, and then we did another draft that we finalized with Daisy seeing dead people from the very start, which we ended up settling on and deciding, yes, this is the way to do it. So after we had done all that, we went on exclusive submission to my publisher, meaning we just showed it to them, and they would have 2 weeks with it to look and decide whether or not they wanted to make an offer before we even showed it to anyone else. So we did that in October of 2020. To set the stage of my life in October of 2020. I had recently moved back to Timmins from Toronto. I had been laid off from my job. I had unsuccessfully tried to find new jobs and was doing all these kind of random side gig things while panicking about having employment. The panini was roaring, just, we were going through that, still going through it, but that was the start of it. So there was that. And then the US election was looming in the background, which even as a Canadian, it was still looming in the background. So that was the conditions under which we went on submission. So that was super, super nerve-wracking for me, because it was really a departure in terms of genre. I think there are similarities between Blood Like Magic and Delicious Monsters in terms of theme, and they are both still supernatural, but it felt like a very different vibe. So I was nervous about whether my editor would be interested in that. And I was nervous about what where were we going to go from here? But thankfully in November of 2020, so very soon after, my publisher made an offer on the book. There were a couple election delays in there, but we made it work in the end. And I made the decision to write full time. And so I think in some ways, this book feels like a book of many milestones because my life was so much in transition at that time. And then I finally got to make a purposeful transition decision instead of one that I was kind of being pulled around by, and decided to try writing full time and being an author full time, which has continued to work out for me and I hope will continue to work out for me. And now I'm going to talk about publication edits because there was more editing to be had after I'd done the initial editing and working with my editor on getting things kind of touched up and fixed. And I think there were a few big things that stand out to me that we worked on during the process of putting this book together. Well, for one, we did do a title change, which worked out, and I really love the title Delicious Monsters. I feel like it has a nice visceral feel to it, and I feel like that worked out really well. So that was part of that publication process. But in terms of like editing the book itself, the big things were really the haunted house mechanics. So there is a haunted house in the book. It is a haunted house book. And when you write those sorts of books, you decide how this house is functioning and what is it doing and how does it work. And I think when you watch like a haunted house movie or you read a haunted house book, you might not necessarily be thinking of those things, but there are mechanics. There is a way that it works. And especially in the case of my own haunted house, because I wanted to put my own spin and twist on it. I wanted to do something different. I wanted it to feel familiar, but also very different and like something fresh and new. And so those mechanics had to be explained. And it's a very fine balance, I find, in, psychological thrillers / horrors that I want to reveal enough for the reader to understand what's going on, but I don't want to do too much because you reveal too much and then you kind of lose that unsettling feeling. You kind of lose the scary bit of it because it's all out in the open. I feel like that's very different to a fantasy book where like you want to know as much as possible, and like learning more about the mechanics of the magic or the fantasy, I find never ends up kind of changing your view. It's really just kind of how that information is presented. Like if it's dumped all at once, obviously it's not going to be very fun. But like when it's spread throughout, like there's for me personally, I've never seen there to be a downside to learning more about the world in a fantasy, but it's a little bit different when you're doing something where you're trying to elicit, a sort of feeling of trepidation and unsettling sort of vibes. So that was a big challenge in like going through with that and like making sure there was enough information, but not too much. And then I also had some wonderful suggestions from my editor that really changed some mechanics in the book as well. So the main character, Daisy, she has this relationship with her dad. And when I originally wrote the book, it was a very, very small kind of minor thing that wasn't really involved. And my editor had suggested kind of pumping it up and making it more of a thing. And in doing that, because this is how I do my subplots, I had to go back through the whole book and like shift and change a bunch of different things so that this could be more interwoven. And I actually ended up really, really loving it because I was able to add so much more background, not only to her relationship with her dad, but also her dad's relationship with her mom and their past and how all of that connected to various different things in the story. I'm being vague here in order to not be spoilery, but that ended up being a suggestion that I found really kind of added so much more depth to the book. And that's something that I really love working with my editor on, because I find that she has these amazing suggestions that I hadn't necessarily thought of that then add so much color to the book and make it so much better. And one extra thing that happened during those publisher edits that I hadn't done before was that I did an exclusive chapter. So was very excited and fortunate to have Indigo be interested in doing an exclusive version of Delicious Monsters, which again, there will be links down in the description. Indigo is the only place that you can get this exclusive version, and they do international shipping to a bunch of places. So if you're not in Canada and you want the exclusive version, just check down in the description, check where they ship to, and you can potentially have that shipped to you. So I did that, and so I got to write a bonus chapter, and that was my first time doing something like that. Like, that wasn't like a sequel, but was related to my main book or main piece. And it was fun because Delicious Monsters is a standalone, so it's its own book. And so it was fun to kind of get to tack on this bonus bit. And so it's a chapter from Grace's point of view. Grace is Daisy's mother, and she's the one who has inherited this mansion. And so it was really fun to get to like jump into a different character's head and to like do that sort of thing and like get used to that character's voice from the inside, because I've written that character from the outside POV, but now getting to do that from an interior POV and to get into that. And I really enjoyed the process of writing that chapter. Yeah, it was just great. It was a very positive experience. So that was my first time getting to do that. And yeah. We're now going to jump into the highs and lows of the publication writing process of this book thus far. And I'm going to start with the lows so that we can finish on the highs. So we'll go ahead and start with those. Really, I think a lot of these lows are really ones I have for every book, but like some things are a little bit more specific to Delicious Monsters. But certainly one that came up during the process is like, can I write in this genre? Because I had previously never written a psychological thriller horror. I'd read a lot of thriller books, but I hadn't read any horror books, but I was a big horror movie buff. And so it was really like diving into something for the first time, which I feel like I haven't done in so long as a writer, because I'd been, writing fantasy this whole time and like writing sci-fi this whole time. And so it felt like throwing myself into a new avenue. And I feel like I dealt with a lot of like, do I know how to do this? And like, am I doing this the way it should be done? And am I doing this correctly? And like, are people who are fans of this going to think, no, this isn't that, like, that's not what has been written? And like, that's certainly a thing that I went through as a low, really during the writing process, because that was kind of when I was crafting this and trying to put this together and trying to do it that way. And so that was kind of that hard time. But all the others kind of came after selling the book and the deal of that. And I've discussed some of this as well in my, when I talk about my end of year wrap up and reflections and all of that. I'll have that video linked in the description below. But, the struggle of just the pressure of wanting to succeed and wanting your book to do well. And I feel like I go through this for every single book. Anytime I release a book, I suddenly become convinced that it is going to fail, that it is not going to do well, that I'm going to be cast out of publishing forever, and I'm never going to get to publish anything new or write a book again, and I'm just gonna, I don't know, like fall into obscurity, and like that's gonna be my whole career as an author, just like right down the toilet, with, I think now, the extra pressure of like, this is what I do as my job and this is what I do for a living. And if I don't succeed, what am I going to do? Because it's not just losing, dreams of writing more books and being an author. It's also losing livelihood at this point. So very stressful with those lows. And I think really throughout the process of the book, it's just been that. It's been those same lows going on. Though as we transition into the highs, and we'll talk about that a bit later, I do think I have improved with these things. Let's move on to the highs. So I had a lot of great highs for this book thus far as well. A big thing has been the publisher support. So I've always felt very supported by my publisher for all of my books, but they made an extra push with Delicious Monsters. And so there were things that I hadn't previously gotten to do, which I was able to do. So my publisher sent me out on conferences to do some conference things, and they are also sending me on tour. So as of the time you are watching this video, I will be on the book tour for Delicious Monsters over in the States, though I am doing I'm going to be able to do something in Toronto as well. But yeah, so that's very exciting. Going on like a tour as an author was always like a big dream thing that I hoped would happen one day. And so it's been really amazing that I'm going to actually get to do that. So that was definitely very much a high. They also put together that lovely promotional box. I'll link in the description to a TikTok I did unboxing it if you haven't seen it, but they put together this amazing promotional box that was sent out with advanced copies of Delicious Monsters and like little fake ivy and daisy seeds and like a wooden bookmark, and like it was very, very cool. So that was awesome. And that has been really lovely to like have all those extra things that I hadn't experienced before to get to have those done. And they organized, you know, blog and TikTok, etc. tours as well, which was great. And then just like other things that happened to the book, like getting to have that Indigo exclusive edition was amazing, and being named an Indie Next Pick, also amazing. And my book also got a starred review from Kirkus. So just like wonderful things like that have happened for the book, which I've been very happy to see it get those sorts of accolades and that sort of attention. And so that's really been wonderful. So those have definitely been the highs. I think that's really the thing with every book, is that I'm always going to be able to find something that like, I'm so excited this happened and this was so cool. But I'm also always going to be able to be like, yeah, I'm really stressed out about doing this or doing that. And so, you know, it's an up and down thing, but I wanted to share the highs and lows because I think it's important to kind of, you know, just for, I guess, for transparency's sake, to show that not everything is sunshine and rainbows. Even though outwardly, of course, I'm going to tend to post about the great things that happen about the book. But I found that in traditional publishing and throughout this journey, it's really much more of a mixture, because there's those outward things that happen, but then there's also the internal struggles, things that happen. So that's it for the highs and lows. How am I feeling right now about the book? So I actually think I'm in a really good spot. So I'm filming this on like, I think it's like February 7th. I'm not sure. Dates, what are dates? What is time? But around February 7th, I'm pretty sure that's the date. And right now I'm actually feeling really good. I think something has really been helpful to me is that in the tail end of last year, I started going to therapy monthly, which has been really helpful to me because I have a lot of anxiety around things. And I just got into this point where I was like, I don't want to be doing this for every book. Like, I don't want to feel so stressed for every single book I release. I was like, that's ridiculous. I was like, I can't be doing this. So I have been attending therapy, which has been really helpful. And a big thing that it's helped me do is really break negative thought patterns, or kind of interrogate more thought patterns that I have about, you know, things like failing and like trying to predict that I'm already failing, or feeling like my book has already tanked before the book has even come out. And I've been getting better at like interrogating those thoughts and like diving a little bit deeper into that and like pulling myself out of anxiety spirals. Because now I have some strategies and some things to implement. And so I feel like I've been doing a lot better with that. And so at this current point in time, I'm actually feeling very good about my book and its release. I feel like I've released a lot of the anxiety of like feeling like I've failed before anything has happened, because I'm like, nothing has happened yet. Like, the book hasn't come out. So how can I know whether or not it's failed if it hasn't even come out. That doesn't make any sense. So those sorts of like backtracking things. So I feel like I'm in a really good spot. I think it's also been really helpful that this February I've had a bit of a gap between my work. So I finished off working on some book stuff in January, and so far in February I haven't had any like work come back, with the exception of one quick round of copy edits for a short story. And so I've been able to take so much of this time off, and I've just been spending the time kind of, pre-filming things and like getting stuff ready for promotion for Delicious Monsters, and like hanging out and like reading and sewing. And I think having this downtime has really just kind of helped me like chill out and like calm down. And I do feel like I'm going into the release of my book with a really good headspace, and a much better headspace, because I was not doing great in December. I think December was my like most anxiety filled, sort of point where I was just like negative thinking about the book all the time, and how it would perform and how it would do, and like meeting expectations that no one has actually put on me, that I have created for myself. And so I think coming into the new year and like being more vigilant with those strategies and things like that, I feel like I'm in a good place, and I'm really just looking forward to having the book be out there. I think that is the part I really love the most, is once the book is out there and it is doing its own thing, it is just doing its own thing. And I feel like I feel the most kind of release after that point. And it's nice because then when I'm talking about the book with people, I can be like, you can just like go and get it and read it whenever. I don't have to be like, yeah, just wait until this like far away date and then you can finally read it. So I'm just really excited for it to be out. And I think something that really helps me as well is that when it is out and I'm doing that promotional period and I'm getting to talk with people about my book and discuss it more, that also kind of is enjoyable to me. Like, I love my book. I love being able to talk about my book and share that with other people. And so those are, the things I'm looking forward to. Not to be mixed up with the hopes for the future section of this video, but yeah, that's pretty much kind of how I'm feeling. I really didn't expect to be in this good of a state as I am. And mind you, it's early in February, so who knows, maybe a couple of weeks from now I'll be like, oh, well, that changed very swiftly, and you'll get to see that in the February writing vlog. But for now, I'm feeling really good. I feel like I've got some good strategies in place for dealing with my anxiety, and I feel like I have a lot of great things to look forward to that I'm fortunate about, like getting to go on this tour. And I feel like I'm going in with a good attitude and a good feeling, and I feel like things are gonna go well. So yeah, hopes for the future for this book, and I guess my relationship to this book. I hope that I continue to be kind to myself with my book, no matter how it performs monetarily, because I think at the end of the day, I love all my books and I'm proud of all of my books. And I think that's something I always want to be able to keep a hold of, because I think, once your book goes out into the wider world, and then it's kind of like, how's it performing monetarily, and like, how is it being rated by other people? And I think that's kind of separate from my own feelings about my book. And as with all of my books, I hope to be kind to myself and stay attached to what I love about my own book, outside of outside opinions, which is not to say that outside opinions don't matter, not though I don't check on reviews, but it's to say, it's a separate sort of relationship. And so I hope to continue to be kind to myself as I've stepped into this, more improved attitude. And I also hope for my book to have, a positive long-term performance and a long-term lifetime. Because I think if I've learned anything with my first two books, it's that you really can't judge the performance of a book based on how it comes out right out the gate. And I think there's a lot of focus on that in publishing because, you know, those first week sales, for the most part, for most people, are going to be your highest, biggest sales ever. And so there's a lot of focus on that first week because, you know, that's how you come out the gate swinging. Like, that's going to be your biggest impact. And so you want this huge impact. But I think there's something to be said about the lifetime of a book and being steady. And I think that's why, you know, the mid-list and mid-list authors are so important to the whole publishing ecosystem, because it's that good, steady performance. And that's the sort of thing that I hope for my book more. I think it's great to like come out and like do really well right from the start, but I would rather my book does well over the lifetime of its, you know, publication, than it, you know, come out of the gate really high and then kind of drop off. So I definitely hope that for my book. And I hope to get to continue writing, you know, thrillers and horror and getting to explore new genres. You know, I've done fantasy and sci-fi and now I'm dipping into these genres. So I hope to continue to get to explore those, which I in part know I will, because next year I'll have another thriller horror book out. But yeah. And I think that's really kind of just the hope for it. I think, you know, we always want our books to do well. And I think sometimes, you know, I ebb and flow where I'll have very like lofty goals and I'll be like, oh, maybe I could do this really big thing. And I think I'm at the point now where I'm just like, it would be nice if it would do well over its lifetime. And I hope to give myself the grace to not judge the book's performance based on what happens in the very first book. So I think those are my hopes for the future of Delicious Monsters. And that's it for this video. Thank you for joining me to discuss the journey, I guess, thus far of Delicious Monsters, which again is out today in stores in the US and Canada. You can also, for international friends, you can get it online at the Book Depository, which ships free internationally to a lot of countries. And if you're in the UK, you can also order it online from retailers, though it won't be out there. Like, it won't be available or ship until the end of March, but it is available through that. And also I have some events today. So if you want to join me in some of these events to discuss Delicious Monsters, I'll be doing an event, a virtual event at 3 p.m. ET with Barnes & Noble, with Natasha Preston, as part of Barnes & Noble's Midday Mystery series. And we're gonna chat about our books. And then tonight at 7:30 in person at Brave and Kind Bookshop, I'm going to be joined by Terry Ben Walker, and we are going to discuss and launch Delicious Monsters. So if you are in that area and can come in person, there's that. But if you want to join virtually, there's that Barnes & Noble, and I'll have the links below for more information and for registering and all of that. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Very excited to have my third book out in the world. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.